Welcome to the Versa Business Tips Podcast. I'm your host, founder and CEO of Versa Business Systems, Shaheen Mazloom. We're here with a financial expert today. Our guest, Jon Morris, is the CEO of Fiscal Advocates. How you doing today, Jon?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me here.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So for those out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little about you and what your company does.
Absolutely. So I've actually been in the digital marketing space for the majority of my career. My last job, I founded a company called Rise Interactive. I grew it from just me to about 250 people, a little bit under 40 million in revenue before selling it. Stepped down on April 1st of 2020. So it's kind of like the prank was on me in terms of the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
3 little kids, didn't know what I was going to do next, but I had to do something sooner than later, and started basically a fractional CFO company called Fiscal Advocate that's technology enabled, that focuses very specifically on helping professional service companies. So if you are a B2B professional service company, and my expertise is guiding you in your finances to get greater insights.
Okay, very cool. So are you focusing more on helping companies get to a point where, that they're exiting for a better multiple, or is it kind of for the long haul, making sure their finances in order, or is it a little bit of both?
It is a little bit of both. So we've had just this year 3 of our clients were able to sell. One of the number one reasons why a deal falls through when you're trying to sell your business is that the buyer doesn't trust the finances. So getting your finances right, organized, and having good trusted acumen is really important. But we also have people in distress situations where they need to do a turnaround and get their cash management under control right away. And then we're also just poised to help you. Like, most people don't really understand the secret to your decision making is organizing your financial data to make really solid decisions. And so, what is your gross margin? How much of your revenue do you spend on sales and marketing? Are you investing in R&D? All that comes from your finance department, and understanding how you are benchmarking relative to your competition is a really important component.
Right. Now, when people are starting out, they're focused on just getting customers, making sales, right? Like, at what point is it a good idea to really start organizing? Is it better to do it early on, or, is it, do you got a couple years? Like, is it a complete mess if you're waiting a couple of years to get a finance company in there, or, do they still have some time?
I mean, look, I'll just use Rise, my last company, and Fiscal Advocate, my current company. It started off with just me, and I have a little bit of an edge given that this is what I do for a living.
Right.
But I had perfect books from month one. Now, there are certain things, like, I'm just going to give you an example. A lot of professional service companies don't know what their gross margin is. And so, as you said, they're just going out and they're winning business over and over and over again.
Right.
But if they're not supporting that business profitably, it's really hard to scale and grow.
Right.
And so, organizing your finances to understand, when you take all the people that you hired to do the work, do you have a 30% gross margin, which means you're most likely losing money? Or do you have a 50% gross margin, which means you generally have, not only are you profitable, you have enough money to actually invest back into the business. Right. And so it's certain key metrics that if you really focus on them, and you focus on them early on, it'll help guide your growth in terms of the investments you make. So I'm a big believer in starting early.
Right. No, that makes sense. Now, what about those companies that are like, man, my finances are just such a mess. We're going from zero to, we'll have a good week, a good month. We think we're going out of business. There's a lot. We talk with so many companies that are like, I don't know what I'm going to do, especially when they're looking for funding. They're like, I can't cover payroll next week. Like, their finances are such a mess. Is it too late for those people, or is it like, let's go ahead and see how we turn this around now? What is your take on that?
So absolutely not. There's many times I have to do a cleanup job. Now, sometimes people's books are a mess and actually they're fairly profitable. Right. Sometimes, here's a real story. I had a client, this is before I knew them. They were at the 1 yard line of selling their business. Mm-hmm. And the buyer walked away because they just did not understand the numbers.
Right.
And so they were not able to sell the company. they ended up hiring us because of that very reason.
Right.
Was they didn't want that to happen the next time around. Turns out they had debt. Turns out they were losing money. Turns out they weren't growing. But there was enough time. They weren't going out of business.
Right.
Now they are profitable. They've paid down a ton of their debt. They're probably 12 months away from being completely debt-free.
Nice.
They're growing at a really rapid rate. They're investing, like in any industry. I talk a lot about the professional service industry, but in every industry, there are standard best practice numbers that you should follow.
Right.
And if you follow those numbers, good things will happen. And so they caught on early enough, and now I consider them one of my greatest case studies.
Wow.
And and it's an amazing feeling. That's actually
right.
At my last company, Rise, we worked with some of the largest companies in the world. One of my clients was a Fortune 15 company.
Wow.
And when I take this company, they paid us incredibly well. The people were wonderful. The work was challenging, great work. So like you would say, like, well, what are you going to complain about? Like everything sounds awesome there.
Right.
But if a new CEO came in and said, you know what, John, I apologize, but we're going to fire you. And not only are we going to fire you, but we're going to stop doing what you guys are doing completely. No one else. We're not going to hire anyone else.
Right.
I think they would go from a Fortune 15 company to a Fortune 15 company. I don't think the impact would have been that great on their business.
Right. Right.
Where in this scenario, I'm dealing with small to medium-sized business owners who are wonderful people and just need some financial stewardship.
Right.
And so like to see helping somebody losing money and in debt to now making a profit, growing their business, getting out of debt, it's just a wonderful feeling.
Wow. And that's just focusing on the numbers. They say numbers don't lie, but is there more to it than the numbers, or is it really just figuring out the numbers and then figuring out what you should stop doing because these numbers don't make sense, what you should do more of because these numbers do make sense? Is that pretty much it, or is there really more to it?
I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. The first thing is all of us who own a business have a boss, and it's the same boss, right. The income statement.
Yeah.
Okay. Our income statement as a boss is completely objective. You are either profitable and you are growing, or you are not profitable and you are not growing. And so if your income statement is looking the same every single year, or if it's getting worse, then you as the CEO are not doing something right.
Right.
Okay, so to me, it's the greatest boss that you could possibly have out there. The second thing I'll say is that there are hundreds or thousands or infinite amount of KPIs that you could look at, but I believe only 3 matter.
Okay.
The first one is how much cash you have relative to your monthly overhead.
Right.
Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26.2 billion in an all-cash deal. Okay? If you grow your cash, you get to do really cool, fun, strategic things. Right. So I'm a big believer in putting emphasis on growing your cash. The second number is your profit margin. Now, once again, in every industry, there are different numbers that are considered best of breed. In the professional service space, a 20% gross or 20% EBITDA, which is a fancy word for profit, right, is considered gold standard. Now, in order to get a 20% EBITDA in the professional service space, you have to have a 50% gross margin, and then you have to have 30% of your revenue is dedicated to spending on non-client related expenses like sales and marketing and HR and finance and all those different things.
Right.
And that gets you 20% EBITDA. And then the final number is year-over-year revenue growth. And in our industry, the gold standard is a 20% year-over-year growth.
Right.
And so if you know just those 3 numbers, every KPI I can think of rolls up to one of those three numbers. And so by simplifying it and knowing where to focus your time and energy, you can, there's a saying that those that get measured get managed.
Right.
And so we want you to manage growing your cash, growing your profits, growing your revenue. And it really applies to every industry.
Interesting. Okay. So, so it sounds like it's never really too late. I mean, obviously it could be too late for some, but for the most part, if you're catching it early on enough, you can get out of the mess, especially if you're a profitable company. You can get organized. You can get to a point where you're scaling, you're profitable, and you're growing fast enough to be able to have a healthy exit, which is really the goal at the end of the day for most people. You're either exiting or you're passing it down to your family member or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
But most people are going to exit. So I guess my question would be this, right? So if you know that you're profitable, right? But maybe, so for example, we were talking to this guy the other day and he's like, I had two major customers pay me late. And so I've got to borrow $100,000 to cover my payroll. It's a decent sized company doing $5 million a year, nothing too crazy, but he's like, so we asked him for his tax returns. He's like, I haven't done my taxes in 4 years. I just, when it comes time to tax time, I don't have the money to pay the taxes. So I'm just waiting until I can, stockpile some money and then I'll file the taxes. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like a good plan to me. Like, so for those people that are so unorganized, they got a bunch of debt. They're spending money like crazy. We had one guy, he was borrowing $50,000 to cover payroll, but you looked at his Instagram and he's driving a Lamborghini. Like, do you ever have those times where you're sitting down with a client and you're like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we cannot help you. Or you're like, look, you got to change your lifestyle. You got to get rid of the Lambo. You got to file your taxes. You got to put a payment plan. Like, do you have to really get, I guess,
personal?
Personal, but also like, what percentage of business owners do you think are lying to themselves?
Look, I would say this, the number one reason profitable companies, from the ones I work with, are not growing their cash, which is something I really want them to do,
right,
is that they are taking out all the cash for their personal lifestyle.
Right.
And, what I explain to them is that you could only, unless you have other sources of income, you're going to have to figure out how to live off of what you're generating. Or you have to go get a second job, or you have to think of something that is going to support that lifestyle. And so I do have to, and it's a sensitive subject.
Yeah.
But, going back to, the KPIs that matter, like you talked about cash collection. Well, there's an expression called DSO, or a KPI called DSO. It stands for days sales out. And what that does is it analyzes how quickly from when you send out an invoice do you take to generate the cash or collect the cash.
Right.
In the professional service business, I want you to collect your cash in 45 days or less.
Right.
We have absolutely had clients that are taking 90 days to collect their cash. Now, sometimes they have a whale of a client. Give an example, and I know this is going live, and so if I'm wrong, this is just what I've been told. But Procter & Gamble, which is one of the largest advertisers, if not the largest advertiser in the world, I've been told that starts and their negotiation at, we will pay you every 120 days from when you get the invoice. And so if you're a small business and all of a sudden you win this massive client, but they're not going to pay you for 4 months, you're probably going to figure it out. Like if you don't have enough negotiating power, and so there's scenarios like that I think are legitimate, that like you just don't have the negotiating power. Now I try to teach them ways that you can negotiate to get that down to a more reasonable number. But there are other times they just suck at collecting cash. And, at some point you have to say, like, we're going to put pencils down, and pencils downs mean we're stopping working
until
I get my check. Because at the end of the day, we're not in business to send out invoices. We're in business for the cash that we get to collect that pays our employees and pays our vendors. And so that's a metric that, once again, rolls up to your cash collection. Right. Same thing with your distributions. That's another metric that rolls up to your cash collection to see if you can grow your cash.
No, absolutely. So now, something like a financial audit where you're diving through everything, you're figuring out all these different metrics from profitable, from different all the different KPIs that are out there. What is something like that going to cost somebody? Let's say somebody's been in business for a few years, they're kind of a mess, they're not really organized with their financials. What can they expect to be paying for a service like that to be able to get to to be organized and to get to a healthy place?
So I'm going to give you the greatest non-answer ever. So the reality is there's 3 different scenarios when it comes to cleaning up financials.
Right.
One scenario is, you know what, guys, it's August 6th today. We are going to start on August 1. We're not going to worry about the past at all. And you're just going to be clean going forward. Yeah. And so in that scenario, you're just talking about putting a solid month-end close, putting your charts of accounts together, probably a couple $1,000s a month, just to manage the month-end close. Right. Transaction volume is the big thing. So if you're dealing with 10 transactions a day or 10,000 transactions a day, the volume or the cost structure will change. But generally what we see is a couple $1,000s a month. Scenario 2 will be, we're going to go back to January 1 of this year, and we will clean it up. And once again, it all depends on the transaction volume, but it might cost between $5,000 and $20,000 to clean it up, make sure that everything's categorized, organized properly, and we're going to do it right. Right. And then scenario 3 is we're going to go back to January 1 of the previous year. And the reason why is because then you can have year-over-year analysis in terms of how you're doing. Yeah. And once again, that could range, I don't know, between, let's just say $10,000 and $30,000. I'm trying to give you a decent range. It's not egregious. You know what I mean? Right. It's not like you're spending $200,000 to make this happen. But, it could be a mid 4-figure to 5-figure investment is to do the cleanup, depending on how bad it is.
Right. But I mean, that could be the difference between you being able to exit and actually sell your company versus working till the day you die, or never being profitable, or maybe closing down.
My job is to help you make decisions. If you have really messy data, if you think about every decision we make is a leap of faith. Right. Yep. So if I'm going to go hire that salesperson, it's a leap of faith that salesperson is going to work out. If I'm going to go hire that employee to help with this, project, it's a leap of faith that they're going to do a good job. Yep. By organizing your data, we make that leap of faith smaller.
Right.
And by making
more
it
of an
smaller,
educated decision at that point.
Yeah, that you should make 10x the cost of managing your finances if you have your finances in solid position.
Right. No. Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say most companies, unless you're obviously in the enterprise level, would you say most companies don't have a CFO and they just have, their wife or their mom or whatever managing the finances? Or what?
Yeah, I would say when you are sub 10 million, it is highly unlikely that you have a CFO. You might have someone like me as a fractional CFO. Right. When you are, let's just say, between 10 and 20 million, you might start getting a CFO or a controller internally. And then I'd say probably 25 million plus, you definitely are going to have a CFO or at least a really solid financial operation.
Okay. All right. And now, would you say there's a level of business that it doesn't really make sense to have a CFO? Like, if you're only doing, say, 100,000 a year, a couple 100,000 a year, and you're only doing maybe, 2-3 sales a month, it's like, there's not really, there's not a whole lot to look at here. Or do you think it's worth it no matter the size of the business?
You know, what I would say is like when you take a fractional CFO, a fractional CFO could literally be an hour a month.
Right.
You know, so uh, when I started,
Man, you're
uh,
really you're paying for your time, right? It's not like
yeah.
it's right.
So like when I started Fiscal Advocate, uh, I paid our VP of accounting from Rise. He was no longer there and he was doing freelance work, an hour a month. And I just had him look at my close process and all the things I did.
Right.
And I just wanted a second set of eyes to see like if I did it right. And I mean, my revenue was probably what you just said, about $100,000 for the year.
Right.
But I spent just an hour. I mean, I wasn't like you don't need to go crazy. Now, I was also doing all the bookkeeping myself
Right.
at night, so you might need to pay a bookkeeper if you don't know how to do the bookkeeping yourself. But I still paid a second set of eyes to make sure it was accurate and correct.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. No, so with technology the way it is right now, would you say technology has really advanced your ability to be able to take on way more clients than ever before? Or, has it become a competition almost where there's software and things out there that people can use to help them be more organized in their finances that kind of replace a fractional CFO?
Um,
Where are we
in my
at as far as
so
AI and technology in that industry?
So in my sense that technology, first of all, I'm building my own technology. I have 10 full-time dedicated people to building my technology.
Wow.
We automate a ton and it allows us absolutely to scale and have more customers, but it
Right.
also allows us to do things that we would never be able to do as humans because the technology is working 24/7.
Right.
So that's a huge benefit. There's also, when you think about a fractional CFO that has lots of clients,
Hmm.
your most talented person's at the top.
Yeah.
But, if you don't have technology, that means they have to go into like every single client to look to see how they're doing. And the reality is they just don't do it because it's too hard to do.
Yeah.
So technology allows you to have what I call as a multi-client view, where
Hmm.
you can see the anomalies and be like, show me all the clients that are losing money right now. Or show me all the companies that are growing rapidly. Because if they're growing rapidly, there might be opportunities to invest more to have them grow rapidly. And if they're losing money, then
Right.
it's like, what do we need to do? And but I'll tell you the biggest thing that technology, I don't believe, will be able to do. And that is help create the right sense of urgency
Oh, right.
for the company. So I'm just going to give you two examples. One is an existing client of mine. One is someone I'm advising. Okay. Both are around 10 million. Both are losing money or have been losing money. Both either had a full-time CFO or a fractional CFO. Both had very solid reporting on a monthly basis of what was needed.
Right.
But neither of the people in charge of being the financial stewards of their business ever said, we have a gross margin problem and we need to fix it right now. And this needs to be done in the next 14 days. And this is how much cost we have to take out of the business so that we can run this business profitably. And so a technology is a tool that will give you a report and it will tell you what needs to be worked on, but
Right.
it doesn't
But it's not going
necessarily.
to make you do it.
Yeah, it's like somebody's got to be like, Shaheen, like, this is a big deal. Like, we got to
Right.
fix this. We got to fix it right now. Let's get going. And
Right.
that's where I think a really good fractional CFO or full-time CFO comes in,
Yeah.
is that
Somebody that's
sense
going
of
to shoot
urgency.
you straight and let you know, look, you got to get this done or you're not going to make it. Right.
Yep,
Like technology doesn't have emotion, not yet at least.
exactly.
Right.
Soon they'll have
uh,
more emotion than we do, but at the moment they don't.
Right, exactly. Now, so somebody was asking me the other day, and I do it a certain way. Now, I have somebody different do my books than I have
Yeah.
do my taxes.
Yep.
my thought process behind it is I want my books to be completely accurate, and I want my tax guy to kind of see what he can do to minimize my tax bill. Do you think that's a good way to do it? Do you think everybody should have two different people?
Absolutely. First of all, there's oftentimes people are telling me like I have a great CPA like helping with my finances.
All right.
A certified public accountant is really trained to be great at taxes.
Right.
They're not necessarily great at financial analysis and giving you insights to run your business.
Agreed.
So
I can't stand when people tell us like, "Oh, well, let me talk to my accountant." I'm like, "Oh, are they a funding expert?
Yeah.
Is that what they? Oh, they're a credit card processing company too."
Yeah. And so, so to me, if you really want to look at all the different departments of the finance department, so
Right.
one department is tax, and there should be, whether a CPA that you work with or someone internal that is ensuring that your taxes are done on time, they're done accurately. I'm a big fan of tax minimization, but not tax evasion.
Right.
And my general personal rule is if you think of the line between risky tax taking, and then on the other side non-risky tax taking, and then there's like a gray bar, I want to be just slightly to the left of the gray bar, so I'm always on the safe side of your taxes.
It's better to overpay on taxes and be safe than to underpay and have them knocking on your door.
and go visit a place you don't want to visit.
Right.
The second one is your accounting. And what I call accounting, it's invoicing, AR, AP, payroll, and month-end close.
Right.
And you generally want who's ever doing your month-end close to be different than the people who are actually paying your bills and your payrolls. And this is a financial control standpoint, because if they are paying your bills and sending out your invoices and recording all the transactions, there's an opportunity for them to manipulate the data and steal from you.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's generally the most likable, trustworthy guy that does it. So,
always.
Yeah.
It's always the person you least expect too, right?
Yeah. The third one is your financial planning and analysis.
Yeah.
And that is all about budgeting, forecasting, insights to your business, the decisions you need to make.
Right.
And then the last one, which sounds like where you fit in a lot, is your corporate development and your fundraising and whether it's securing debt loans, equity investments, oftentimes M&A might fall in that category as well.
Right. Absolutely. So, dude, it's been eye-opening. I think a lot of business owners can say the same thing, that it's never too early, and I don't think it's ever too late to really get a professional financial advisor to look at the books, right? Like it can't hurt, it can only help, right? I think a lot of the times business owners just need to be honest with themselves of where they're at as a company. And I think a lot of the times business owners just don't know what they're looking at, right? Like the guy who owns a bunch of car dealerships, he most likely is really good at selling cars, right? But he may not be so good on the financial side or the marketing side or whatever it is. And that's why there's all these B2B companies out there, so I think it's, business owners, really taking a look at themselves and their business and just being honest with themselves about where they're at financially. And if they're not where they want to be, it's time to call someone like Jon and to set them straight. So Jon, we're wrapping up here today. What gift do you have for our listeners and our viewers today that can help them accelerate their business?
So there's a couple of things. One, I have a free ebook that's called Decision Making Science for Agencies. You can also buy it at Amazon on the Kindle. We'll share it in the description, but
awesome.
It's my methodology towards budgeting, forecasting, and the insights to your business. The second one is we provide a free financial audit. So I'll use the word assessment. It's not like a real audit, but we will look at Do you separate your revenue by lines of business? Do you have your gross margin calculated properly? How much of your revenue do you spend in each specific area? So what percent of your revenue goes to sales and marketing? What percent goes to operations and finance? What goes to your executive team? How are you doing from a month-end close process? How are you doing from a budgeting process? It's a fairly rigorous, thorough process.
Awesome. Very cool, man. Well, I'll make sure to put the link for the analysis in the description. And then is there a link for the ebook or how can
there's
we
a
get
link
that
for
to people?
There's a link for the ebook, and
Awesome.
then
I'll make
just
sure to put that in the
contact
description
me
as well.
if you're interested in the financial audit. And you can also always go to fiscaladvocate.com to learn more.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Jon. Thanks for sharing all the knowledge with us on finances. I haven't had a CFO in my business or a fractional CFO in my business yet. As we're moving more into the from the small, medium-sized businesses to the enterprise level, like you said, the Fortune 10, 15, 20, we're starting to move in that direction. And I think it's time we get organized as those monthly incomes start increasing and doing it right. And we're doing the right thing that's really going to, help us scale to where we're trying to get to over the next few years. So I appreciate your time. We'll definitely have to get set up for that analysis. And, I can't wait to have you on here in the future and be a little bit more knowledgeable when it comes to finances.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Would love to come back on, and I hope this was helpful for your audience.
Thank you.